Trick number 2. So I'm going to write that in an easier way to keep track of. Trick number 2 for doing this with characters is to make them care about things other than the plot. Okay? People come to me a lot and say, readers are telling me my characters feel flat. What can I do about this? What does it mean to have a round character? Well, this is one of the big things that we talk about. One of the ways to have a round character is to have them care about things. If a character, everything that they think about, everything that they are, is focused toward their role in the story, it feels fake to us, and the characters feel flat. I had this problem early on in my books. I would write characters into roles rather than trying to make them individuals in themselves. I didn't know I was doing this. I was a brand new writer. I think it's very common. It's particularly common when you write about the gender opposite of your own, because your natural inclination is going to put them into the book fulfilling a role. Usually it's going to be the love interest role. And so if you're thinking of a character as a love interest, rather than as a character, they're going to only do things that the love interest does. Pay attention, watch this sometime. You're storytellers, start watching. There are a few sort of quirks that people tend to do when they put someone of the opposite gender into a book. One is, you will notice that the other character often has to, the woman has to play like the straight man. Like, I notice this a lot in comic books, or in webcomics, or in any sort of comic. The gender opposite the person writing it becomes, kind of like the solid, dependable one that's always kind of rolling their eyes at the antics of the main characters. That's because, rather than thinking of them as a person, they are thinking of them as a role in the plot. They become the stoic foil roles. This is what I did. My female characters were always in the book to be the love interest. So one way to get away from this is to start giving people things to care about other than the plot / the main character. Okay? Make sure they care about something. People do this. People have lives. People have cares and whims, and they are... they shouldn't always be so neat. They tie up exactly to what's going on in the plot. Okay? So, something to be aware of. We may come back to this one, but I want to get on the, I want to talk a little bit more about how to do this with a main character, too. Because your main characters basically need to be the ones that you need to focus on. One of the ways you're going to do this is you're going to start thinking about your story and say, where is the character when the story starts? Most people's lives don't begin when the book begins. Sure, Portrait of the Artist, the Young Man has a stream of consciousness being born scene, but I don't suggest most of you do that. Your main character should be going about their life when the plot hits them like a freight train and derails it from them from it. And you should be considering what it is they want in life. What do they want most? Particularly if the plot had never happened. It's okay to intersect the plot with some of these things. But particularly, if the plot had never happened, what do they want most? And you can kind of subset this in A, before plot, and B, after plot. Or during. O-T. Boy, okay. Or during the plot, we can kind of do this for... Let's say Peter Parker, before he becomes Spider-Man.
Go on a date, for goodness sake.
Go on a date. Yeah, that's one of them, but he has more. What else does he want?
He wants to go to college.
He wants to be a big, important scientist. Yeah, he wants to learn all these things. I mean, and he has, his basic. If you read the comics, he's got his basic geeky pursuits. He wants to go to science fiction conventions. He wants to collect his comic books. He's got all these things. You give someone these things that they want to do, particularly with a couple of big hopes and dreams. And then after plot, during the plot, you give them other things. What does he want after the plot? Well, fight the villains and defeat them, but these other things don't go away, and so you've got some nice depth of character because they have powerful, different motivations that sometimes run into each other. And these things will become a big part of the plot, but the idea is, before the plot starts, they have passions and desires, and those don't go away when the plot starts. This is going to go a long way toward making your characters have more depth. Just this one step alone, doing this for every one of your characters, is going to go a long way toward it. You have to be careful not to overemphasize some of these. I'm thinking, have you guys seen Lost? There's this one guy that lost his son, and it became everything that he was. I must find my son! And it got really annoying, because anytime one of these things kind of just starts to dominate, the problem is everything else fades in the background, and you then have a character who's no longer one-sided. You have to have multiple passions and desires, and usually they should kind of be conflicting within the character. This is going to round them out quite a bit. Okay? Thoughts, questions, ideas? I'll throw a gummy bear at you. Yeah.
Something specifically that,
Woo!
that in the Wheel of Time series,
yes,
you've added onto, but like the last couple of like the 6, 7, 8 sort of books.
Right.
For me, Rand got very unidimensional. He's like, I am the dragon. And
right.
like Harry and Matt remained interesting because they liked to gamble and they did their blacksmithing. They had those
right.
The other things that like
oftentimes
they remained interesting because they liked something.
Oftentimes people's favorite scene in a lot of the Wheel of Time books is a scene where Perrin, who is this character who's been on all this questions, and it's in book 4, I think it is at the start, or maybe it's in I think it's book 4. He's become something big, larger than he was. He's become a friend to the wolves. And he's learned these superpowers and things. And in the beginning of this book, he goes and remembers being a blacksmith and spends the chapter just making door latches. And it's often picked as one of the people's favorite chapters in all of the books. Because he feels so real and genuine in those moments, because he is a blacksmith and he likes making things. And sure, saving the world is important, but simply sitting down and making some standing up and making some door latches or nails or whatever it is so humanizing to him and shows someone who has a passion other than the main plot, that scene keeps getting chosen as one of people's favorite scenes. Likewise, one of people's favorite Star Trek episodes tends to be the one where Picard is trapped inside the alien probe and lives an entire life learning how to play the flute and having a family. Generally tops the Next Generation list as the best episode by people who watch it all time. This is not a fight against the board scene. This is not this is not what you would pick as the most dynamic, but it is so humanizing because it shows him being passionate about different things and conflict and those different things that people love it.
You mentioned having characters' interests conflict with
yes.
what's going on. How do you do that without making it seem contrived?
You make everything in a book is going to feel contrived to a little bit because they're really coincidental. Your job as a novelist is to learn how to work like a stage magician to make people forget about that. Because books are filled with coincidences. There's no getting around it. And so what you do is you make it rational enough. I mean, we can bring in Peter Parker. The fact that, being a scientist would not necessarily have to conflict with being a superhero. But in the second Spider-Man film, they were able to believably convince us that he would work himself so hard doing one that he couldn't do the other. And it kind of became a dichotomy between him. I can't do both of these things. It becomes a big conflict to him. Putting the things in conflict like that worked very well. So what you're going to have to do is just make them passionate about both and make them interfere with each other. Making it not contrived can be terrible. It can't be terrible, it can be difficult. I mean, the terrible examples of this are things like when, we get into sort of, the love interest won't let me pursue my goals in life because she's scared of wizards or something like this. This becomes feel very contrived unless you can world build it to the point that the love interest, he comes from a world, a realm where people can use magic or execute it on sight, and his father was killed by a rogue wizard, and then he meets the main character who is a magic user, and that's a real conflict. I just don't like them is not a real conflict. So how a lot of these things work is through proper foreshadowing and world building, and you know, making sure that the depth is there, the backstory is there to make it believable. Can you see how how you could do that the wrong way and the right way? The wrong way being with, you know, you just end up meeting the guy, she ends up meeting the guy, and then he's like, oh, you're a wizard, that's yucky, I'm not going to be with you anymore.
Flimsy excuses versus actual systemic things that are part of the world you would almost expect as the reader at this point.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, if the reader can say, oh no, that's going to be a problem, before the characters realize it, that's a good thing. Okay? All right. Yes?
I got a quick question. So, with the love interest, you see with a lot of YA novels,
yes,
there's always a love interest.
There is.
And if you are writing a YA novel and you just don't feel like it's appropriate, then what other relationship can you put in there that would draw the same?
The same? Well, nothing's going to be the same.
Or similar.
But there are lots of other interesting relationships. Mentor and student works very well, particularly in YA. But also, you know, best friends who start not as best friends. My wife's making me watch, what's it, Camelot 90210, the new Merlin show. She really likes. It's the BBC Merlin. I call it Camelot 90210. It's quite sappy. But you can see that they've got Merlin and Arthur, and they hate each other at the start. It's going to be, I'm anticipating, hey, these two are going to be best buddies by season 3 or something like that. And that's perfectly acceptable too. And a lot of YA fantasy will do that with the strange creature. You know, I have the dragon that I have met that I must tame, and you know, become the dragon whisperer or whatever, and then you know, things like that. That's a perfectly reasonable conflict. But you've got to understand, teens are interested in romantic relationships. They have just started to really get interested in them. It is one of the main things that draws them to books. That doesn't mean you have to have characters getting married by the end, but if you write a character who is a boy who is, you know, 16 and is not sizing up most girls he meets, you're probably writing him wrong. He's at least going to acknowledge which ones are pretty and which ones aren't, because that's how teenage boys of that age think. Unless you've got a very unique character that you're building that in as part of who they are. Girls, I assume, do the same thing. Not having been one, I don't know.